evening. This is Second Chances with Pablo Agrio. Welcome, everyone. Tonight, we have a special show for you. But before we get into that, I just want to remind the audience, if you like what you see, just don't forget to hit that like, subscribe button, and keep joining us every Friday evening, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. We'll try to have a good topic to talk about, something that you may find educational, enlightening. We're trying to line up some guests for you. We had a guest lined up for today. Unfortunately, he's not able to join us today, but we hope to have him on a different program. Uh, he's a fellow author, and we wish him well. We hope that wherever he's at, he regains his strength and he's able to join us in a future date. So we're going to pivot and we're going to improvise like a good Marine. And we're going to try to talk about something that I think is of interest to anyone, and that's rights. Rights. Everybody's always talking about, I have a right to do this, or my rights, or, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot of confusion with that in terms of, you know, what rights do you really have? Sometimes you have rights that are written in the books, in the law, in the Constitution, but you cannot exercise those rights because there are consequences. And we'll get into that a little bit. But I thought that we would start with the basics, right? Because there's all kinds of rights. There's the Bill of Rights, there's civil rights, human rights, consumer rights, there are tenant rights, all kind of rights. And there are certain differences that I think that is important that everybody understands, because as members of this society, uh, you need to know where you stand at all times and how to respond to certain situations, and you know when a right can be demanded and enforced on the spot, and when you need to wait and see how things are going to play out, so that you don't get hurt. So the most fundamental of all of them is the Bill of Rights. That's found in the United States Constitution. And we always talk about the 14 amendments, or the amendments. The first 14th are the ones that we lean on the most, and the ones that most people know about. And there's some of those amendments, people refer to them all the time. uh, they've heard of it somewhere, or they probably read about it in school, et cetera, et cetera. So we have, I'm going to cover some of those, just go down the line a little bit to highlight a few of them. And then I'm going to get into some personal experiences, things that I've seen, things that I've heard about, and see how these things connect to the rights that we have. And then maybe it may get you to thinking about something that happened to you in your own life, or it may make you curious to go research and find out a little bit more about what I said, and educate yourself, to see where you stand in terms of what your knowledge, understanding of these so-called rights that we all claim that we have. So with the 14th Amendment has the First Amendment, which covers freedom of speech, of religion, of the press, of association, et cetera, et cetera. The Second Amendment talks about the right to bear arms. The Fourth Amendment talks about the protection against unreasonable searches and seizures, right, without probable cause. The Fifth Amendment talks about the right against self-incrimination, um, and you cannot be forced to give evidence against yourself. Uh, you know, Speedy trials and stuff like that. The Sixth Amendment is the right to an impartial jury when you're being prosecuted, and there's some other things that are covered in there. I'm just giving you the highlights. If you're interested, you can always Google that or go online, and you'll be able to read the entire amendment for yourself. The Seventh Amendment covers trial by jury in civil cases. Eighth Amendment, the right against excessive bail or excessive fines. Uh, that not and the main one that the Eighth Amendment covers is the right against cruel and unusual punishment. And that's an interesting one to me, and I'll explain that a little later. Uh, then we'll jump right ahead to. I'd like to talk a little bit about the 13th Amendment, and the 13th Amendment is an interesting one to me because the 13th Amendment ostensibly abolish slavery in the United States, but there's a clause in there that says that, or the way it is worded, it says that slavery was abolished everywhere except when people are convicted of a crime. So the long and short of that is that if you are a prisoner, you're a slave, and that's a touchy point. I've talked to a lot of people about that, and that comes up in conversation, and a lot of people either don't believe that or they don't, or it's not that important to them, and I find that really hard to believe and hard to stomach. Personally, I think that uh, if slavery was abolished in this country, it should have been abolished everywhere, and we shouldn't even have that kind of verbiage or language in the Constitution of the United States. But to my surprise, that doesn't seem to be anything that bothers anyone in a great deal, and no one, no politician, no activist, or no one that I know of any repute has ever bothered to take it on that issue and argue against it. Of course, in order to get that out of the Constitution, it would take a tremendous battle because it's got to be ratified by so many states and what have you, all the different political machinations that have to go on for that to take place. And there may be some reason that I don't know of why the powers to be don't want to tackle that issue or even talk about it in public. I don't hear people talking about that. Uh, I wrote a little bit about that in my book, In Pursuit of Happiness, and it didn't raise any eyebrows. Nobody really know what. I haven't received any feedback about that, but that's an important one to me. Also, the 14th Amendment, which talks about due process and equal protection of the laws. Now, what about civil rights? Some of the rights that you have in the bill of Rights and some of your civil rights are, they're intertwined. They're the same thing, but they're covered in different under different topics. But the civil rights, people talk about the civil rights. They talk about voting rights and school integration, affirmative action, and now in recent times it has extended to the LGBT community, also immigrants, women's rights, and then some of the ones that it overlap are the freedom of speech and right to a fair trial, which is also covered in the Bill of Rights. So I think that what I would like to talk about next is who enforces these rights and what rights can be enforced. Well, when we talk about the Bill of Rights, we normally think about situations where you are dealing with the police and there's some issue. Uh, yeah, there's a question on the screen there about stand your ground rights. That's another right there that has caused a little bit of controversy in recent times. Now, that's a different type of right, and I'm sure that um, there's some people that might have some opinions about that. But before I get sidetracked on that, let me try to see if I can keep my train of thought going on that. So, who enforces rights, right? So, when we talk about Bill of Rights and dealings with the police, right, that has to do with you losing your property or your freedom or maybe even your life. Usually, we're dealing with law enforcement issues. And here's the thing: when we have rights and we feel strongly that our rights are being violated, especially when we're dealing with law enforcement, sometimes we can be of the mindset that because we believe that we're right, we don't want to follow instructions. And I have to say to you that that's a big mistake. If you are dealing with someone who has a badge and a gun and a baton, and he is giving you instructions to do something, even if you think he's wrong and that he's in violation of your rights, my advice to you is to follow those instructions. Take notes. There's people with phones and cameras nowadays that can record what's going on, or you may even be able to take your phone out and record the situation, so that there's a record of what is taking place, so that later on when there's a dispute, you can produce evidence. Now, the reason I say this is that when you're dealing with people that are in a position of authority, whatever that may be, whether the local police, the FBI, whatever, people that are coming at you with suspicion that you did something wrong, or that they're looking for somebody, or they're looking to make an arrest, or they think that you're in possession of some kind of illegal stuff. Um, it's best to follow those instructions, and then if later on it turns out that they had the wrong person, or they conducting themselves in a manner that was not in keeping with respecting your rights or with the law, then there is places that you can go, there's avenues, there's recourse that you can go, and you can then address these in that particular forum. But the difference is that if you take your time and try to do this later on, when the dust has settled, there's a good chance that you can still talk for yourself, that no harm came to you, and that you can communicate your concerns to the authorities in a manner that then is going to get resolved, whichever way that may go. You may not always get your satisfaction or get things to work out the way you want them to work out, but at least you're alive and you live to see another day, and to fight for justice the way you may seem it or deem it, and you let a higher authority uh, resolve the dispute. When you try to do it on your own on the spot, there's a good chance that things may not go your way, and there's a high probability that you may get hurt if you don't follow instructions. So understand that. Please heed that advice, and make sure that you take care of yourself. You protect yourself at all times. Now, what about civil rights? Civil rights is a different kind of animal, right? Sometimes there isn't any one person or authority, the figure that you can call to enforce your civil rights or to protect your civil rights right on the spot. So, for instance, if you suffer discrimination, or you're being prevented from voting, or you want to attend a particular school and they won't let you for whatever reason, it's not like you can dial 911 and say, hey, please come over here and take a look at this situation. Those situations are situations where situation happens, you feel that your rights were violated, then you have to secure an attorney. You got to explain to him what the situation was, and then this situation is more likely going to end up in court. You're going to institute a lawsuit, and you're going to have a judge then make a ruling as to whether or not your particular rights were violated. And so, just in the interest of time, and really briefly, you can see that those are two separate kinds of things. The same thing with, say, uh, tenant rights or homeowner rights, or those kinds of rights, or consumer rights. There isn't, when you feel like your rights are being violated, and those rights are, there are many, they're in the books. and they, they're extensive. You have to really read these things. I mean, sometimes when you go buy something, or you're leasing a property or something, the people that you're working with put a contract in front of you, and they have you read it, and all these things. You got to make sure that when you're reading these documents, that you understand what they say, and that they're not violating any rights that you may have. And if you don't understand what you're reading, or what they're saying to you, then it's always best to take the documents, maybe hit the pause button, get yourself a lawyer, or take it to a lawyer, so that you can have some kind of interpretation, and advice as to whether or not what you're getting yourself involved in is something that's going to work out for you. So you see the difference then in these kinds of situations. That one, it's, if your rights are being violated, you can call somebody and have them, protect your rights, like the right to be safe in yourself, in your property, in your person. If someone is about to uh, aggressively violate that right, you can dial 911. You can have the police come there, come to the scene, and then protect your rights. If somebody's messing with your property, the same thing. So so there are differences in regards as to what you're allowed to, how you go about protecting your rights. Now, some of these rights, interestingly enough, even though they're in the books, um, you don't always get a chance to exercise those rights as freely as you may think. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. For instance, you say, people always say they have the right of freedom of speech. But what we have seen in this country, that yes, that's true. That's the First Amendment. But, well, you have to be careful what you say and how you say it and where you say it, because sometimes you may think that you're exercising your right to freedom of speech, but that exercise then comes with consequences. You can say something that offends people, or offends an institution, or offends a community, and next thing you know, uh, you end up apologizing or retracting what you said, and you become a social pariah, and you get branded. The word that I hear thrown around a lot lately is you get canceled. So you got to be careful with that. The Second Amendment says you have the right to bear arms, the right to bear arms. And that's true, you have the right to bear arms. But more and more, there are issues that are happening in our society, the incidents that are taking place, where people are really starting to question, you know that right. And then on the other hand, you have people that are really uh, fighting hard to make sure that right, that is respected and protected. And then you guys, you can make up your own minds as to where you fall in terms of those issues. Whether or not having the right to bear arms is a good thing or not. um, I was faced with a situation once when I found myself in a place, in a prison facility. And at the time that I was doing time, there was something on the books that were called the Prisoner Bill of Rights. And prison authorities were handcuffed, so to speak, in terms of what they could do to prisoners and what they couldn't do. And it afforded people that were incarcerated, particularly in the state of California, some protections from abuses, and et cetera, et cetera. And eventually, lo and behold, that Prisoner Bill of Rights was abolished. And they said that there was no need to create a particular set of Bill of Rights for prisoners alone, but that whatever rights prisoner had was already uh, found in the Constitution, and that's all prisoners needed. Well, maybe so, but when the Prisoner Bill of Rights was still in play, prisoners were a little bit, they had a little bit more protection from abuse and other restrictions that took place in a prison environment. But once those protections were taken away, then the prison authorities went back to doing what they did, and it was a little bit harder to breathe, so to speak. Um, One of the things that I found interesting with that was that um, it. I used to think of the situation where with the undocumented aliens in this country. Now, if I was to ask you, do undocumented aliens have rights? There was a time when I felt like no, undocumented aliens don't have any rights. They're illegal aliens. They're not citizens, so they don't have any rights. But and I used to think that the law was in support of that, but that's not the case. We didn't talk about it before, but there's also such a thing as human rights, and that's in that coupled with civil rights. You can see where some, undocumented aliens, not some, but undocumented aliens as a whole, have certain rights that protect them against abuse and so on and so forth. And of course, human rights also include, the fact that if a person is in need of medical help, they're having an emergency situation, that somebody needs to take care of them, and that's all under protected under human rights and so on and so forth. So uh, it appears today, though, that one could make an argument that undocumented aliens have more rights than prisoners, because there's a big push in this country right now to open up the borders and to bring in more people, whether they have green cards or they have visas or whatever. It really doesn't matter. The push to open up the borders. One can argue whatever, whether or not what is the real reason for doing this, or what is the motivation behind it. But that's for another person to discuss. Maybe people that are better informed as to what may be the motivation for that. But yes, even undocumented aliens have rights, and some of those rights, one would argue, need to be enforced, because we don't want people getting sick and not getting help, or being abused by the authorities. Even if they're going to get deported, it still should be done in a manner that is in keeping with what is fair and just and equal and humane. So just another one of those things where we have to be careful about when we talk about the rights that we don't want or want people to be protected by. you know uh, Lately also there's been a lot of talk about discrimination in this country, and those things have been going on. They continue to affect workers across the states. And there's laws now in the books that Congress have passed, and agencies that are in that are supposed to be monitoring these situations, that so that people don't get discriminated against or abused, or that they feel safe and protected while they're at work. And so those laws are also a little complicated, and they fall under a different category of laws and rights that you have. But as you can see, the issue of rights and what kind of rights you have, and how you go about protecting and making sure that your rights are being respected, it's a complicated and extensive subject, not something that we can cover here in the 30 minutes that we have. but it will do you good. I think, and I hope that the goal here was to spark an interest so that you can, if you're not well informed, or if you haven't taken the time to really research and investigate these things, that maybe this segment of this program would inspire you to do a little more reading, do a little bit more research, find out what your rights are, how do you protect them, how do you make sure that whether at work, whether at home, whether on the streets, whether you go to see a movie, you're at a park, whatever it is, when you at a concert venue, whatever the situation is, if you go buy a car, that what your rights are, how you go about protecting them, who you can contact to help you enforce those rights. Because it's not enough to say that you have the right to do this. As I explained earlier, or as I alluded to, sometimes you think you have a right, and maybe you do have that right, but you're not free. That doesn't mean that you can do whatever it is that you want to do wherever you want to do it. You still have to you know understand what the particular uh, boundaries are, and make sure that you don't do something that is going to get you in more hot water than you need to be. So, indeed, if you guys have any questions, please reach out, through Master Media's Productions, uh, or you can try to contact me directly. Uh, before I say farewell to you guys, I just want to make sure that you guys understand that every Friday for 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, we're going to be tackling a different subject matter, something that may be of interest to you, that we think that you can benefit from. Um, there's another thing that I meant to talk a little bit about, and that was what happens if you get arrested and you go to you find yourself in jail. There's I think there's a new law now that talks about they don't want you don't have to pay bail to get out. I'm not really sure. It's like I said, this is something that just came down the line. I'm not really well informed of that, but this is something that I think is been enacted, and different states are doing that now, and that's a good one too, because as you know, it used to be that depending on the nature of the offense or what you're being accused of, when you get arrested, and you go to for a bail hearing, sometimes you can be held without bail. Sometimes the bail is so high you can't make it, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that this new law that was passed was passed with the mindset that they're trying to make it a little bit fairer for everybody, so that those who can afford and those who cannot afford can still have the same opportunity to be to be freed, while the whatever it is that the situation that you're facing, the charges, the arrest, whatever works its way through the system, that you're not doing time in jail, and maybe you can participate in your defense, gather evidence, help your attorneys, whatever. So anyway, I hope this is being informative, and that you guys learned a little something that you didn't know, or if nothing else, at least it sparked an interest in you, so that you can go on the search engines and Google, or maybe hit your local library and do some research, do some digging, so that you can find out exactly what it means to have rights, and how you exercise them, how you protect yourself. Okay, this has been Second Chances with Pablo Agrio. Hope to see you again next Friday. Until then, take care. God bless. Peace out.